What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Coin a Geek, the podcast. It has been a minute, almost like a few thousand minutes, because we haven't done one of these shows in almost about a year. But here we are. We are broadcasting live on Twitch. First time we've done this live as well, but I am super excited to be back and to be joined by my longtime friend, sometimes partner, the Fly Fox Pro himself, Mr. Daniel Schultz. Daniel, what's up, dude?
What's up, man?
Red face, your red beard blending in with a nice red background.
Yeah, I figured I looked at our old logo for Coin a Geek, and this was the shirt I was wearing in it, and like the hat, and I was like, you know what? Old school today.
Old school. You were all in on the Arizona, but
that's right. Well, yeah, I mean, of course, Wildcats for life. You know, I'm not super
thrilled about this. I mean, I am a terrible designer, and you could tell that I picked this backdrop. Just by picking out a bunch of generic stuff, and we're like, hey, if it says my name on it, then
one of your posters is askew there too.
It is, but you know what? It's kind of like the Leaning Tower of Pisa at this point. You just want to leave it. It's going to be a historical landmark. No, the truth is I just been too lazy to fix it. But so what's up, dude? It's been a little bit, right? When was the last time we did one of these shows?
I have no idea. A year and a half, I think, something like that. Almost two. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, because I did like 2 shows, I think, just by myself.
Yeah.
And that was right around when you were getting ready to do a job change and you were having a baby and everything. So why don't you tell everybody what you've been up to for the last year and a half? Because they kind of know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I've been working and raising a child, and then this whole stupid, shutdown, everything happened, and basically we've all been shut-ins for like months and doing nothing. So why not do the podcast? If we're doing nothing, we might as well do something, right?
Right. So you were working for the studio, and then you left, and you had a
job that I don't talk about, but it's a good job.
Oh, okay. You can't talk about the job.
Yeah, I can't talk about the job, but
okay.
I like it.
But are you able to work your said job during COVID?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I am what they call an
essential
worker.
Well, cool, man. So you've been doing stuff on your own. Obviously, you've got your own branding, the Fly Fox Pro stuff. Tell me, talk a little bit about that before we hop into our stuff.
Well, mostly, I stream myself drawing or talking about comic books and movies and nerdy stuff that, because mostly Coin a Geek has mostly always been focused on games. Sure, we talk about nerdy stuff and movies and things that we like, the geek world, as it were. But right. I've been enjoying doing other things, talking about some of those other things that maybe you aren't as interested in, and doing draw art and stuff. And I did a new video about how Disney took us all to hell in the black hole. If you watch
that's so funny, dude. I saw that video on YouTube, and I was like, dude, this movie scared the snot out of me as a kid. And that particular sequence was creepy. I haven't seen that movie since I was probably like 10. And I keep seeing it on Disney Plus. I'm like, I'm going to go back and rewatch that movie and see if it's as messed up as I remember. Because I just remember the end being like some twisted 2001 Space Odyssey.
It's so crazy. Like the whole movie it's supposed to be like it was Disney's attempt to do a Star Wars movie, and then it was just like not a Star Wars movie. And then they, 2001 was also influential, and so they had this 2001-esque like scene where they enter hell, and then like there's like people walking around. It's so crazy. There's people walking around in hell and all this nonsense.
So you've been doing a lot of that stuff, the comic books, the and that's kind of how you got the connection with our guest, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, well, cool. Well, I'll let you talk a little bit more about that. But if you guys are watching this right now and you're watching on Twitch, obviously you know my face. I predominantly stream video games, just kind of anything from whatever is either trendy, or right now I'm doing something that is not very trendy, which is Ori and the Blind Forest. I like to mix it up a little bit. But we're, so I've been predominantly just focusing on video games. So it's been nice to see you kind of come back along with this other side of the Coin a Geek, right? Because it's not called Coin a Gamer. And so to be able to infuse this other aspect. And so what we're going to talk about today is we're going to interview a person who it's pretty special to have this guy on, because in a lot of ways he sort of blends everything that Coin a Geek is about, with comics, with art, with gaming, a little bit of music. I was reading some of his Wikipedia there, so we're super excited to have him on. Why don't you introduce him for us, Daniel?
All right. Well, this is Mr. Doug Tenaple, and he is, of course, the creator of Earthworm Jim,
Hey.
the creator of
Hey. Hello, guys. How you doing?
We're doing
well.
great. Thanks so much for joining us, Doug. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your certainly busy schedule to be a part of this.
I'm in the middle of penciling pages, but I thought I'd take a break, come hang with the Koine Greek guys. It's cool.
Awesome. So, Doug, obviously the thing that that drew my attention to you and me being sort of new to your work outside of just video games, the first thing when Daniel said, "Hey, we have the creator of Earthworm Jim on here, we should have him on the show." So I'm assuming that's how most people know you, or how did? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of work, but nothing is probably more has penetrated more to the American audience than Earthworm Jim. But I've got probably 5 other, maybe 10 other successes if you count comic books.
Sure.
So I've got 20 graphic novels, and some of them have sold like over 150,000 copies, like Ghostopolis. And I sell the movie rights like to every studio. So I've sold them to Disney, Universal, Sony. I've worked for DreamWorks, Warner Brothers. And then video games wise, I've put out games through EA and Microsoft and DreamWorks Interactive back in the day.
That's
and then
great.
I've also now been doing crowdfunding. So that's to me, that is the future of all platforming.
Well, so Doug, you've done pitches for Spielberg, and you've worked with Ben Affleck, and you've been in those, sort of on the outskirts of that Hollywood menagerie for a long time. And you've gone whole hog, full force into this crowdfunding thing. What is it that really attracts you to that most?
Well, it's more I resent, I was always an artist, right? So I've always kind of done my own thing and had a lot of fun being an independent artist. And, quickly I needed to make a living. So I had to go and work for studios. And even Earthworm Jim was technically for a game studio and a toy studio and a TV studio. And you just start to see kind of, I'm used to doing it my own way and in my own head. And studios don't work that way, just for a lot of reasons, right? You can't have a team of like 100 people just doing whatever they want to do in their own head. You have to pay for kind of a top-down management that, to me, fundamentally goes against the independent artist spirit. So a lot of people have a goal of just making studio. That's all they want to do is like go work on Transformers, or go work on Stranger Things, or go work on some Madden football, or whatever they want to work on. That's their dream. That is not my dream. My dream was always to create and make unique things that I thought was fun. And so it really started boiling my career down for me. Video games were too unruly and too expensive. TV shows, animation and stuff were too labor intensive. And so it got reduced down to doing comics. It's just more my thing. And outside of that, the only thing more pure would be to do paintings or something, or web comics or something even smaller. Because as soon as you start having to put teams together, I think it dilutes a lot of the artistry of the independent.
So the collaboration aspect of video games and TV and movies, those are all things that are like, you have a whole bunch of pieces you're putting together. And at some point as a director or producer of those, you're removed from the art quite a bit. Do you feel like your transition into like exclusively crowdfunded stuff, has that made it so that it's easier for you to do to focus on your love for that art?
Sure. There's a downside to that too, in that now you have to appeal to, like, I have 3,000 backers, let's say. Now I have to appeal to 3,000 people and convince them to give me money instead of just one executive. So the executive is just a middleman between you and a mass audience, which could be 20,000 people that you only need a couple bucks from, or 100,000 people. And I just go hit them direct now. And if I can get 3,000 people to fund a book, then I can do whatever I want. But if I deliver something they don't like it's so, whatever, I'll call it creative, but I don't want to insult my audience, but it's so out there that they just go, I'm not going to pay for out there. I'm just not into, Eraserhead or some weird self-expression. Then you have to sell out a little bit to start addressing your audience. So really the compromise doesn't end just because you get an indie audience, because you still want the money. The real pure artist is the one who can do really any kind of madness he wants, and the audience sticks with him. And I don't know if that even exists these days. You see it in the fine arts.
Right. So like, for instance, somebody that I know that you appreciate and as one of my favorite painters is Ivan Earl.
Yeah.
And anybody who doesn't know Ivan Earl, if you ever have seen Sleeping Beauty by Disney, he was really the primary artistic driving force on that movie in terms of style, especially the backgrounds and just beautiful paintings. And you see him, he sort of had that same path in a way. He was at Disney. He got this opportunity to basically shift Disney for all time in terms of artistic direction, away from the Snow White Pinocchio style into something else more stylized. And then he goes off and just paints for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
And probably enjoyed himself a lot more, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that's the problem with all artists, is we're kind of madness and selfish and don't want to give things up, So,
Right.
So Doug,
but you can take their money, and go draw, whatever caca animated series. Go work on She-Ra. Go be a director. And by the way, you might as well, if you're going to start selling out, you might as well just go work in the cafeteria on She-Ra, because you're about the same amount of artist.
strong words.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, I wanted to take us back a little bit here, because as I was kind of doing a little bit of research on you, Doug, and reading through some of the Wikipedia profile on you, I noticed a little thing that came up that I was kind of pleasantly surprised on. A show called Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Yeah, it was my start in professional animation.
Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in that, and what was that like, going from, as you put it, maybe a non-professional artist into that industry?
Yeah. Well, I got that job, I think, in 91. So I was like 25 years old.
Yeah.
And, I'd been a self-taught artist, not a great artist, but self-taught animator, not a great animator. But I was down in San Diego, and this animation company opened up doing Saturday morning cartoons. I couldn't believe it, that there was an animation company in San Diego. And they needed to staff up to a couple hundred people, on all these different shifts. And I got a shot, and I barely got that job. I was shocked. Yeah. Because I was looking at some of the artists' work and going like, they're way worse than me. Like, I'm talking like half of them. The other half were better than me, but still. Yeah. It was weird. So I barely got my job. And I started animating for them like at minimum wage, doing Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Wow.
And, I was known to be the fastest guy on the crew, who could knock out more shots than anyone else, but my work was so. But this is what happens, is they were always behind.
Yeah. So they needed you.
They needed me to animate like almost 5% of the show by myself.
That's job security right there.
Yeah. So out of hundreds of people, I became, the dog food guy. Throw that to, we need quick, get 5 scenes to Doug. And I just go, bam, and just blow them out.
As an artist, and you look back on that show, obviously, besides just your involvement in there as an employee, what did you think about that? Just the actual show itself?
Well, the show itself was terrible. The artistry was terrible. The animation was terrible. It just didn't quite come off. We were brand new. We were the first people doing, and it was 2D drawn animation on the computer. We were the first people doing that, really. And but it was Saturday Morning Chum, The show writing was okay. The voice work were all the great voice actors, and the visuals just came off so iffy and awkward that it looked like a really mediocre animated show.
Gotcha.
And it was just, look, we were all in the same position. None of us were like big time, even TV animators, much less movie guys. Since then, and we were all kids, so since then, some of the guys have moved on to be major players, like running whole games at EA, Blizzard.
Yeah.
You have Mosier, who did all the character designs on Emperor's New Groove. He's one of the big designers at DreamWorks. I'm just saying, there are big names that came out of that. Luther McLaren was one of the guys that helped storyboard Cat Scratch. He's one of the greatest artists. I met him there at AFT animating on Tomatoes.
That's great.
So Doug, you talked for a second there about how you were the fastest animator, and you were known to be like just going 100%. That drive is something I've noticed about you. When you tell stories, and it's not something you're bragging about necessarily, but your effort into your comic books today, a page a day, things like that. What is it that drives you in that way, where you've always seemed to put 100% of yourself into your work and have that motivation and that drive to do that?
Yeah, I've learned to be. I'm a good self-manager because I've worked. I came from construction. Was me in high school, like just this scrawny kid, and I didn't want to let my dad down because he was this manly man swinging a hammer. And here comes the artist's son, is going to go and try and get a job at the feed plant. And I didn't want, he'd say things like, "You carry my name, to Naples." And I just thought, I want to do what's right by him. And he would get compliments by these burly construction guys saying, "Your son is like super skinny, but man, he hauls ass. Like, he is a hard worker." My dad would tell me that, and he was almost in tears. He said, "I never thought I'd hear that about you." And he said, "It just made me so proud. I can't believe it." And so that really sunk in deep to me, that when someone is paying you, you're not just working for the Lord, but you're also working for this company, and you want to make them feel like they got a good return from their work. And I saw my peers who were in the same job, and they were burnouts and drug addicts and lazy. And as soon as the boss in the corner, they'd be laying down, or whatever. And I would keep working. And I saw my peers, because later I would hear from the other coworkers how they couldn't be trusted and they weren't very good. I saw that you really can't fake performance by doing nothing, that someone really is watching what you do and waiting to see if you're worth the money they're paying you. So I just started applying that kind of field labor mentality to the arts. And I don't think a lot of artists do that. I don't think they're raised around hard work. I don't think manual work. I don't think they're raised around that kind of rugged discipline. I just don't know of many military guys that go into doing comics or video games. They tend to go into more labor intensive stuff. And I just think the artists are a little kind of soft and griftery most of their lives. And then they go into these fields of work. Probably, I would say games and television are less griftery, only because they are so labor intensive that it's very hard to phone it in those things. And they're very much like, "Look, we paid you. This is the work you'll do." You don't tend to get that. Comics have a page rate and stuff, but most comics, I don't see how someone can do a page every other day or a page every week and expect to make a living on it. Again, if you're Mike Mignola, you can, but not for 95% of the comic artists out there.
So Elliott is a musician. He actually composed our theme song you heard earlier.
Sure.
And he plays a whole host of instruments, guitar and bass and a lot of things. And I have dabbled in video production and other fields of artistic endeavors, but like I'd say the majority of artists, we languish in our obscurity. But
as you should.
Yes, and enjoy ourselves while we're doing it, because we have a greater degree of freedom.
That's right.
Having worked in an artistic field for so long, have you? I'm trying to figure out this question as I ask it. It's basically, have you have you found that a lot of people who want to become to be in the positions that you were in, they didn't have the dedication to get there, or what was the thing?
Oh yeah, 100%. People don't get what I get because they don't do what I do. So it's different. If you work as hard as I've worked for 30 years and you can't make a dime, then you're allowed to say it's unfair because you've really put in your time. Most people won't put in the time, and within the first 6 months, when they see it doesn't pay much, they just go, I'm not going to do this so much. And I've just always been balls to the wall since I was a kid. That's all I've done. It's all I ever wanted to do. I was shocked that I would ever make a living at it.
Right.
But then I started seeing how unproductive other artists are, and it's actually really easy to stand out among them. And I think Americans they're in big trouble. American artists, you're in trouble because you've got entire countries now that will animate, draw harder, and draw better than you. And with the virtual office, they can hire anybody from any company to do pages, coloring, lettering. They can't nail writing, but animation. You see, TV production going to Canada and stuff. On the worldwide market, it's not good news for Americans if you're, first world snowflake artist. And I see a lot of that culture in the arts, a whole lot of people being very precious and entitled and not realizing it's an honor and a privilege to get to do art. And if you really want to get paid to do it, I mean, if you're not doing it 8 hours a day, that's what you call a professional artist. No one's going to pay you to do it 8 hours a day. You have to prove that you want to do it 8 hours a day first. And then maybe you'll get paid to do that someday. But most people aren't willing to do that. So it's not a surprise to me. They ought to languish. All of us ought to languish in obscurity until we can have people demand that we do it for fame and money because they like our work so much, because there's so much of it out there, or the quality's so great. The market isn't that tricky. People pay for things. They squander money on music that make them feel good, TV shows they want to watch, comics they want to read, cartoons they want to see. People pay big money all the time for it.
Yeah.
So, Doug, you mentioned basically animation has sort of left the United States. There might be like key animation, but all in betweens and any of the meat and potatoes of animation, the real depth of it is all overseas. Maybe like Pixar and DreamWorks have they're doing those movies and stuff, but the in-betweens of especially 2D animation, those are all done in other countries.
Yeah, and DreamWorks really got collapsed into Universal. So there was a Universal team and there was a DreamWorks team. These are full studios. The Universal team is run out of Europe. Those are the ones doing the Despicable Me. They found great animators in France for a price. They were able to do their Despicable Me for 1/3 the cost of what DreamWorks did it for.
Yeah, and then
Universal acquired DreamWorks. So really, that's a collapse in the industry. The DreamWorks animators being folded into Universal.
So I guess my question is, you worked at that Attack of the Killer Tomatoes company. That nothing like that would exist today, right? And did it last much longer than when you were there, or
not much? Not much. They were a tech company by an inventor, Barry Sandrew, who I'm still in contact with, and his son too is a fan. But Barry basically was doing scans and cross sections of the human brain, and that was the actual software. That was his expertise, was like in brain imagery. And then he learned to take the black and white scans and add color to them. And so then he started opening up a business, this is his brilliance, of colorizing film. He was the first guy to color. He invented colorizing film. And then got a deal with Ted Turner and started colorizing all of their movies. And then from that, they saw that they could do frame by frame, right? Because they were already going frame by frame on a film, that they could just draw lines. They were doing edits frame by frame and pointing to stuff and drawing with a mouse or whatever. And then he said, "Oh, we can just remove the film part of it and just animate."
Mm.
And so it was brilliant stuff. I think the problem was they didn't have enough animation culture there to really drive the production and software. And being in San Diego kind of cut them off. But yeah, they started, they did a couple shorts and they did a couple, they were colorizing movies for a long time, and they just became something else.
So Doug, to hop back into sort of your history here, going back again to Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Now, you described a lot about how the industry was, maybe the positives, the negatives, who's successful, who's not. Coming in as a young 21-year-old, I believe you said. Yeah. What was your mindset leading up to that first gig, and how did it change in terms of what your expectations were, and what you wanted to do with your artistry?
Well, I was desperate for work. So I had just gotten married in 1990. And before that, I was a muralist at SeaWorld.
Okay.
Part-time, again, terrible. but I did it. And I really liked I just wanted to get paid to do any art. And I mean, I was applying to be like a guy that did ads for the phone book. Like
sure.
Mass paste up ads for phone books or any signage or anything. Really stuff that I would consider very uncreative now. I would do anything. By the time I did AFT, shortly after that, they started laying crews off, and people started getting jobs in San Diego doing video games. And I had no idea games were being done there.
Mm.
But there was a number of huge indie guys that were just running these kind of ragtag teams. And we were doing all our art on a 286 in Deluxe Animator, just doing pixel, art for what was going to be the Genesis. So it was the coming Genesis, and this is, I think, slightly before the Super Nintendo, but the coming Genesis games. I might have done an NES game in there, but it was mostly for Genesis. And we were all getting contract work suddenly. Well, on that one, they were paying me by the frame or by the animation. And I was like 10 times faster, that like I'd never heard of this. In 3 months, I socked away like $12,000.
Wow.
And for me, that was more money than I could make waiting tables. I was doing busboy work and all that stuff. So I just went into that independently. I go, I'll do as much animation as you want. And that first year, after paying all my bills and taxes and everything, I had $12,000 in the bank, which was more money than I'd seen. We were debt free. My wife and I were in a little 1-bedroom apartment in San Diego, and I was we started looking at buying houses, and that was going to be our down payment. The next year, I was able to double my income because I got a job at, not quite double it, but Blue Sky Software. I think they hired me at $28,000 the next year to keep me, because by then the competition started blowing up. This is right around Earthworm Jim time. They were paying me, I think, $35,000. Virgin hired me up in Orange County, paying me $52,000 to work on the Jungle Book for SNES game.
Oh yeah.
4 months later, Shiny left Virgin, and they offered me a job for $80K a year. Then a year and a half later, I started the Neverhood, my own video game company, and all the crew were making like $90K a year. So and then I started selling my comic book rights into Hollywood, making $500,000 on those, some of them. The second book I made, or Tommy Source Rex, I sold for $1 million into Hollywood. So you just start going, gee, when's all this going to end? I'll tell you when it ended, 2008. That's when it ended.
Oh man. We'll get there. We'll get there.
I've always lost, half my savings. Every
9/11
lost half of everything. 2008 lost half of everything in our housing market, in LA. And
sure.
You just get it's bigger stakes. But my job was always really just to draw and work hard, like I was about to get fired. And I'm still that way now. Now I'm just another independent guy going out and begging crowdfunding. Yeah. And I've raised $180,000 on Kickstarter for Earthworm Jim 2. And, I don't know how I'm going to make a living on that. But if I open it up on Indiegogo, then my salary is going to start going up again to something I can make. So
cool. Well, you mentioned Earthworm Jim, so you took us through the process a little bit. Give us an overview there, kind of how you got into the gaming industry, through contract work. So tell us a little bit about how the formation of that company started and what the idea was for Earthworm Jim itself.
Sure. And that's documented. I don't know if I have a copy of the book here, but the making of Earthworm Jim.
Okay.
Somewhere,
Yes,
there.
He's got it. Yeah. If there's any questions you want to point to, obviously, I haven't read the book yet, so
that's the one.
I don't want to spoil it.
It exhaustively tells the whole story of kind of where the team were before the company was formed, how we met each other, and then what we've been doing since. But it really goes into the step-by-step, day-to-day on how Earthworm Jim came to be. And it really was just me not designing the character in a day and bringing it in on a Monday, then deciding to do it, and a year later doing a game, having the game come out.
Yeah. There was something interesting about that game. I mean, I remember seeing previews of it, and the 90s were a weird time. I'm 38, and so the 90s were my childhood. A lot of these animation that you guys are talking about, I grew up on, like Animaniacs and Tiny Toons, and Batman the Animated Series is still one of my absolute favorites. Yeah. And that kind of was this area. When I look back on it now, 20, 30 years later, I can see that people were still sort of experimenting, and there was a lot of that sort of Gen X, like, what are kids going to pick up on? Everybody was hyped up on, Mountain Dew Code Red and everything. So it seemed to really appeal to that. But you get this game that's Earthworm Jim, and I remember our family was not able to afford a console for a long time. So I didn't get to play Earthworm Jim until I was maybe going into my freshman year of high school, around, I don't know, 96, 97-ish. And I just remember loving just the whole aesthetic of it and the sound effects, and it being kind of this, action platformer. And so in that, and as I look again at your development history, you developed a couple other games. You started to kind of dive in a little bit more into the point and click adventure genre, which was another sort of popular genre around that time, with was it Neverhood? Am I saying that right? Yeah, Neverhood, and then Skull Monkeys kind of went back a little bit to the action.
Yeah.
So why the shift in thought? Were you just experimenting with game types, or more as a? I mean, I'm sure obviously a lot of it was.
It's weird because the Earthworm Jim game, by the way, the artistry in that is only there because the team had developed, the programmers and all the tech guys and all of them had already been driving up the art ability of that engine to house something like Earthworm Jim. So it's weird because he would have just been this constricted little thing that wouldn't be as special if he was run through a normal game engine. So this goes into where the tech really starts to open up the toolbox for the artist.
Right.
So that voluptuous game and that amount of animation opened the door for us to start going, well, let's do some Tex Avery stuff. Let's get some weird, funky stuff going. It wouldn't even be open to you culturally before that.
Sure.
So after Earthworm Jim, the thing we were all into, the animation department, when we started our own company, the Neverhood. I just said, I'm going to do whatever. I met with Spielberg. He said he'd fund 3 games, and he saw the Neverhood. It was a clay animated point and click adventure.
Right.
But the reason why we went that route was we were watching games like Myst and Day of the Tentacle, and we were going, well, PCs are already doing bigger animation and character work than this crummy little cartridge. And Spielberg, when they did DreamWorks Interactive, they were in partnership with Bill Gates and Microsoft. So it was going to be a PC-based game. So I go, cool, forget the console. Let's do a PC game and let's do animation. And I go, but let's not do 2D animation. Let's see if we can capture puppet and clay animation, because I hadn't seen it done. It's something I always wanted to do.
Right.
And of course, the animators back then, the partner animators were Ed Schofield and Mike Dietz and Eric Saccone, who had all worked on Earthworm Jim, and going on even further back than me with Virgin doing Aladdin was the big breakthrough game. And we got incredible results. It looked amazing, and it was an amazing game. That team was nuts. So that's kind of goes into my love of creating something new. is a lot of times you create something new and you fall on your face because you don't have, it would have been easier for us to do an Earthworm Jim knockoff and do a cartridge game. Right.
Right.
But that's not what the artist, our funky artist does. We were way more into just creating and having fun. And it really shows in the Neverhood. We were there to screw around and break stuff. And even worse in Skull Monkeys. I mean, we were just full on, just insane. And it's just, and these are family men. These aren't druggies. These are family men. These are good guys. Yeah. And the same kind of work ethic that I was raised with. All of them came from blue collar.
Yeah.
Blue collar construction, swinging a hammer. And we were like first generation artists in all of our families. And so we had this work ethic. We were doing 18-hour days at the Neverhood. Was normal. I didn't take off a Sunday for the first year. It was insane, like harmful to the body. And you're 28 years old, you know, so your body's just impenetrable. So I'm this is in defense of being creative, and financially Neverhood didn't do well. You know, the game got pirated so much. It went around the world. It's one of the most popular. It's probably more popular than Earthworm Jim as far as people who've played it and love it, but it didn't make as much money. So
now, because eventually all of that stuff got bought out by EA. Yeah. It's just going to languish there because it doesn't make any sense for EA to put it out. They won't make they won't make enough money on it, but they're not going to just give it away. And it's kind of sad to see those things happen with games. It's one of my issues with a digital only future is that there will be no way to get a lot of these things.
That's right.
And that's right. Once you allow a company to control things digitally, they can tell you when you can use it or not, because they're just going to rescind those rights. It happens all the time. You buy something on iTunes, and then they decide they're not going to sell it anymore. It's gone. Your money is wasted. You leased it from the company for an indefinite.
And the Neverhood fell into a hole, and it's going to be erased from history pretty soon. Yeah, because it only plays on Win95. It's just not going to get around. I've thought of pirating my own game. I'm just like putting the team together and know, building it again. But it's just it's too easy to keep creating new stuff, and maybe not everything is precious. You know, Earthworm Jim is like landfill from the past that now I'm bringing back into this new story. It's a completely new thing. Like I'm approaching the characters, going, "What does he need to be?" I'm not going to just redraw them, you know, in a 16 by 16 pixel box, you know, just because people like video games. I'm going, it's a time to update them. And these books will be around forever. And if I could ever get the book rights to Neverhood, I could do the same.
Yes, thing. That was going to be one of my questions. Is there any other property that you don't have the rights to that you'd wish you could go back and revisit? And one that I'm interested in that nobody else in the whole world is interested in is Project Geeker. But
that's a terrible show. I really don't care enough about my past projects. It's always so much funner to create something new than to go back to even my biggest successes in the past. It's funner to create. That's why Bigfoot Bill really is where more of my creativity gets put in that, because I'm still building out that world. Earthworm Jim, I'm servicing a video game. So there you go. Yeah. That's the one. Get the new one.
Believe me, it should be coming when you start.
New one's coming, man. It's going to be beautiful. So, that is a killer book. That's one of the best things I've ever done, and I'm real proud of that. And that's what excites me. Looking forward to that. Finishing the Bigfoot Bill and the Earthworm Jim saga in the next 3 years is my goal. I don't know if I can keep this pace up because I'm just going to die. But
so it's interesting, Doug. You've had a pretty varied career, from working on licensed games like Jurassic Park to creating and having a huge hand in what amounted to like a moderate cultural icon in Earthworm Jim. To doing Nickelodeon with Cat Scratch, working on VeggieTales. You've done all these wide and varied things, and yet you've done things in between those projects that you're more known for, and you've had a whole career that has continued all throughout that time. Is it strange when people come and they want to talk to you almost exclusively about something that was done 30 years ago? You were a whole different person then. And
very strange.
You as an artist and a person have matured from that point into somebody different. Is that odd?
It's odd for me, but I understand that it's not odd for the fan. The fan, it's the first time they've gotten to talk to the creator of this childhood dream. It'd be no different than if I finally met, Art Clokey, who made Gumby, or Jim Henson or something. All I'd say is, well, first thing I said when I saw Spielberg is, I love Jaws. He's like, I was 26 years old. I've made a few things since then, Oh yeah, and I love E.T. He goes, I was only a few years older then. And now, he's in the middle of making Saving Private Ryan. The last thing on his mind was doing Jaws.
After coming off of Schindler's List.
It's like he just doesn't care. And I understand now that sentiment is, for the fan, it's the first time they've been able to meet the creator. But for me, I'm working 5 years ahead. I'm not looking back 30 years ago. I look, I make my living off of that fandom, but my creativity is always pointing forwards, and there's no guaranteed living on what I'm about to make.
Sure. So to that point then, Doug, your sort of desire to move on from things of the past, right? You obviously you had great success with Earthworm Jim. But now you're coming back to it in a different medium, right? So then is your impetus for coming back driven more so by a monetary desire, or is it more because like, hey, I miss this and I want to develop this character when I didn't have time to? Obviously it's a beloved property, I assume, as much to you as others.
It really is both, because I need the income. This is true for all the studios too. Everyone can hate Transformers all they want. That's what pays for all the studios' art films.
Right. Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter what I think of Earthworm Jim. It keeps my house afloat. It keeps my artistry afloat. It pays rent so that I don't have to sell out my artsy projects and try and monetize those. So any success that I get off one character group protects other character groups from not forcing them to be profitable.
Sure. No, that's an important. Sorry, that's an important thing that I think we as people just forget about. Just casual moviegoers. To your point, the Transformers movies. Like, why do they keep making these? These are all, in my opinion, not the best movies, but they keep turning them out. I was like, well, this is still a business. You still got to be able to fund these things, and it's the same for you, except now it's all on you, right? You gotta make that happen. So then,
if everything at the studios made what Lighthouse made, they would not be able to make anything. So their business is driven by Fast and Furious, and sequels, and knockoff superhero films, and sci-fi and lowbrow horror, lowbrow comedy, and then they kind of give that money back by doing these tiny art films, and those are never made because they're going to make money.
Well, then you see those, they're basically trying to develop talent to work on the bigger films to make more money. So you see a lot of people like Colin Trevorrow. He started out smaller and then went into bigger films, and other directors and creatives go that route. And it's all a development thing.
So then with that, can you tell me a little bit about what's the last video game you worked on, and what sort of transitioned you out of that industry, or if there's anything else you're working on in that industry, you can let us know too.
Sure. I'm always dinking around with video game ideas. So from a design standpoint, the sketchbook's full of them, but it doesn't mean, and to me, if you write a script, the script doesn't have to get made for it to be a good script. So a script is worth writing, even if the movie's never made.
Sure. There was something you were working on with
the video game is worth designing, even if I can't find a team and $500 million to pull off the game.
Sure.
So I had done Armicrog, is probably the last professional game. I don't think I even made money on that, so I don't know how to even call it professional. I'll be consulting on the Earthworm Jim game. It's really just overview, looking at it. It's more like saying, yay, good job, guys, for the Amico. And then I'm doing 2 tiny indie games of Bigfoot Bill with 2 different teams, and they're just in various states of disarray because they're cheap or free teams, and it's hard to nail talent down.
Sure. Well, I mean, you may have seen this already, Doug, but they just released the updated version of Battletoads. And so now we're starting to see all these games from my youth, right, starting to spawn. Yeah. So we're in such an interesting time to your point about crowdsourcing now and crowdfunding, that we're able to see some of these nostalgic genres, right? When was the last time beat 'em ups were something that were in the popular eye? And now we're bringing it back into the forefront because guys like myself and Daniel and others that are in their 30s remember playing these games as a huge part of our youth. So then
and Castle Crashers updated that a little bit.
They did. I remember when in the advent of like the 360 and we had games like Limbo and Braid and then Castle Crashers, and now we're seeing, and then if you remember when the PlayStation 4 launched, they had a whole segment just about indies, because that speaks to the gamer inside, the pure gamers that love gameplay and that love that artistry. So has that been kind of a sense of relief for you, even if you're not directly involved in it, just to see that sort of artistry be able to take hold in the zeitgeist?
Yeah, I love the indies. I love the small ones. I have way more respect for them than the big ones. You put that much money into anything, you can make anything. But for an indie, a little team of 1 guy, 2 guy, 3 guy teams doing games, that's where the innovation's going to be. Not on the poly count, but on gameplay, which is what a game is. A game is not the number of polys or how real you make the world. A game is a game.
So there's
Candy Crush is a game. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Stardew Valley is one of my favorite games that I've played in the last few years. And that's basically made by 1 guy. And then he reaps all the benefits of that, basically going back to an old style of game and like a Harvest Moon style of game, and really like updating it and retroizing it and making it everything that appeals to the nostalgic person in their 30s. And so I
see young kid gamers out of freshmen in college. I taught a video game course on game design out at Houston Baptist for a couple of years, and some of my students were showing me their work, and it was fantastic, weird innovation, man. And to me, video games it's an art. It can be an art form. There's no reason they can't express themselves through what is an artistic game. What gameplay, and you see things like Journey and stuff come out. I just go, there's a lot of innovation, a lot of fun yet to do. You haven't seen anything yet. This is nothing.
So Doug,
but the tech side of it, I don't care about at all.
You've said multiple times, and it's a sentiment I agree with, that basically like a good game is one with good gameplay. A story is entirely secondary. Maybe it's third when it comes to games.
Yeah. I say, what do you call a good playing game that has a terrible story?
A great game.
It's called a great game. So story is just a different medium. Story does not need to be in games at all. So it can be 90% story or it can be 0% story. It should be judged on its gameplay.
Yeah,
I don't care about story. Story is there's other mediums that are really made for story.
So was that something that led you to both push yourself with the Neverhood and things like that, and then eventually sort of move out of primarily working in games into Cat Scratch and then comic books?
Yeah, games are a terrible place to tell a story. There's better mediums. And I found out I was primarily a storyteller. So I'm also a gamer. I love video games, raised on them. But my passion is more for creating creatures that are alive and giving you the story of why they exist and how it all happened is what turns me on, is being a sub-creator. So I really belong more in comics or book writing or film or TV or little video things or whatever. And really just comics is just the thing I can do just the easiest. It's like I don't have to think about it when I do it.
Right. So you mentioned sub creation there, and I usually have a book sitting right here, which is J.R.R. Tolkien's On Fairy Stories.
A great little
Niggle. And those have inspired me artistically, and I'm guessing they have you as well.
Yeah, Tolkien's short story Leaf by Niggle is a brilliant. These are fairy stories. Specifically is where he's operating from. And it's kind of the why and the wonder. And I think he's fighting against a lot of what's going on in academia, but it's kind of a restoration of wonder in stories. And I don't mean it in a existential way or in even a shallow, My Little Pony way. He means it in the most brutal sense, like the Ring series, Lord of the Rings, Wagner's Der Ring, Norse mythology, Homer, the Iliad. He means like the kinds of stories that broke open the mind of the Western world and really created our society. That's how powerful it is. You know how powerful it is it frees slaves. It keeps women from being chattel. It's like, that's what artists should be doing. That's why I always say we've left our sharpest tools on the battlefield, our sharpest weapons on the battlefield. And artists right now are basically just slobbering, doing drugs and masturbating. And I'm saying, learn a skill, start crafting it. Think 100 years from now, what will be true and what is worth doing.
Let me, if it's okay to break out of the, something you're talking and making ideological comments. And, we, in talking with Daniel, we are, we're believers, we're Christians.
Sure.
And so tell me a little bit about that for your personal life, and a little bit about your testimony and how that is being a Christian working in the industry.
Sure. I've always believed in God. I was raised by my dad was an ex-Pentecostal, so he was an atheist, and mom was kind of a light Christian Science kind of cult, new agey thing. But largely no interest in religion. But I was always talking to God. I knew of God. I had terrifying dreams about God and good and evil, just terrifying dreams. And I accepted Jesus, I think when I was 6.
Yeah.
Tammy Faye Baker led me to the Lord on TV. I was watching her on TV. And, but that was just a baby Christian, But I really feel like God had his hand on me. He was hunting me.
Sure.
Probably in the womb, as the Bible says. You knew me before I was knitted together in the hidden place. And I do think that he had a hand on me, because in 4th grade, the Nazarene bus picked me up, took me to church. And I was largely raised at that Nazarene church. My mom started going, she became a Christian. My brother started going, he became a Christian. That was back in the, mid to late 70s. My dad resisted until probably about 10 years ago, and he's a Christian now too.
Oh, praise the Lord.
So
that's great.
I just say God has been amazing to me. And because Jesus purchased me, I can't be bought by someone else, especially not my culture. And so I am angry. I'm at war with my culture, right? Because I just think it's so illegit, and it gets so much airplay, and it's made to be the most important thing in your mind is whatever culture says is true. And it's almost all lies. And I believe it's going to dismantle our society. It's going to hurt people. It's going to kill people. It's going to kill our country. It's going to kill people in other countries.
Yeah.
And it already kills people today in the womb. And, it's not pretty. It's not good. So I'm God's soldier. And what tool did he give me? He gave me a big mouth, because I like to express myself. And I'm not that good. I'm not a good guy or anything. What comes out of my mouth, Jesus says, don't be afraid of what you put in your body, be afraid of what comes out. And what comes out is sin. So, but he gave me a big mouth, so I'm vocal, and he made me an artist. And those are my tools. And I'm very subversive with my work. All of my work is attacking and defending. So it is cutting the enemy where I know it pisses him off the most, and I am defending what I think is on the brink of losing credibility somewhere in either the last 100 years or the next 100 years. That's my message to my society. That's why I think God put me here at this time. And And outside of that, I literally don't care about culture at all. I don't care what it thinks of me, and it hates me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what it thinks of God, and it hates him. Yeah, creature text, another one there. Very subversive. I'm here to dismantle and tear down the wall, and I might be the only one. Usually I feel like I'm the only one. I'm like, I don't care. God called me. Life isn't fair. You can throw me in jail. You can cancel me. I'm going to keep doing this. I told my kids, if you ever go into the arts, you'll have to change your name, because you will not get work if you want to do it professionally. If you want to write or draw or whatever, you'll have to change your name.
Well, that goes to my point, and I'm sorry, Daniel, I know you have a question, but that goes to my point about that with having worked in the industry as long as you have in all these different genres. How has that looked for you, just in terms of, have you faced, I don't know if persecution is the right word, but have you faced difficulties in getting work, or when you find fellow brothers or sisters in Christ? Talk a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, it's the only, you're right. Persecution might be too heavy of a word, because often that means physical suffering, but it's the only form of persecution anyone in America is going to experience. I experience it.
Sure.
So everyone who says that blacks are not getting employed in a certain way, I only know that my persecution in that realm is worse than most blacks. If you're a conservative in Hollywood, you have a worse chance of employment than blacks applying to Ivy League schools or trying to become a network executive. You will face more persecution.
Yeah.
So everyone talks about gays and trans people. Trans are going to shoot themselves if they don't get certain rights and if you don't use certain pronouns, and they have a certain amount of persecution. I only know conservatives in the arts face more persecution than any gay or trans person in America, unless they're getting, they're not getting thrown off buildings or anything. I'm saying widespread persecution. So widespread shaming, ridicule, abject hatred against you. There's more of that, and permission and coverage for that in the broadside of culture. And that's also why I'm fighting them in a war. I hate the culture.
Yeah.
Because it persecutes Christians. It's anti-American, anti-freedom. It's even anti-liberalism. It's it's even anti-postmodernism, if you think about it. So even the postmoderns are being hypocritical in jumping on that thing.
Right.
And so that's been my experiences. I've heard the most terrible things about my faith.
Right.
That I just swap out the word black person for Christian. So I've literally had someone say, Doug, why are you in TV? When he found out I was voting for Bush, he goes, just get out. You don't belong here. He said, why don't you just quit? Imagine him saying that to a black person,
right,
or a gay person. Why don't you just, I love your work, but why don't you just get out because of who you are? That was normal, by the way, and said in public, by the way, in front of my crew.
Wow.
So I'm only saying that's what the Christians should expect as the norm. And I'm not getting out. You'll have to kick me out. You'll have to fire me. Every backer of mine will have to defund me. And you know what I'll do? I'll still live in poverty and put my books out for free on a webcomic. I will spew it out on you and everywhere else. So try to stop me.
Right. So
I've been purchased.
That's kind of an interesting, mentality. Basically, one of the things I admire about you and someone like Gary Shipman is that you have these. Oh, Gary's the best.
Good man.
He's a fantastic artist, a great man, and he had an opportunity. He told this story recently about how he had an opportunity from Klaus Janson. And if you guys don't know who Klaus Janson is, he was the inker for Frank Miller back in the day. He inked the Dark Knight Returns and all of those great Frank Miller Daredevil runs and Batman comics. And he gave Gary an opportunity to work in comics and as a colorist. And Gary Gary turned it down at the time because he wanted to be a penciler. But then shortly thereafter is when Gary became a Christian, a really strong Christian. And he looked around at the comics book industry and he said, I can't work in this. This does not represent who I am as a person. And so he left it. And I asked him about, does he wish he could go back and change that and have worked for Klaus Janson? He says no, because he'd rather be somebody that nobody knows about and be putting out something that honors God and that represents who he is as a person than to have been the great success that he would have been. I mean,
by the way, that's not just because he's a true Christian, but it's because he's a true artist. What artist gives up his values for money? That's what we call whores, and prostitutes give up their values for money. And that's about what 95% of artists in production and studios do today. Most of them they're whores. They're paid their wallet tells them, I know you spent your whole life learning to draw, animate, write, do music, but I'm now going to pay you to remove your values in your mind, and you're going to do what my mind did, because I didn't work my whole life. I worked my whole life making money and manipulating money, and now I'm going to pour money on you, and I get what I want. You're now my artist. You're an illustrator for my mind. Who does that? Everyone. This is garbage.
So then with that, and kind of going back to what you were saying about some of the things that were said to you, as a do you find that other Christians or like-minded people in your industry don't have the thick skin and the mentality that you do, and therefore they are, I hate using this term, but marginalized, in terms of there just aren't many believers in the industry. And I think there's a twofold aspect of that. I think there's a perception from what I would call greater evangelicalism that says that, well, comic books and video games and anything in this genre is a waste of time. Don't do it. But then also those that can break through, like yourself and others, that are trying to do something with the gifts that the Lord's give them, have been so discouraged by the industry that they just walk away because they can't handle it and go do something else.
Yeah, it's and other personalities aren't me either. Right. So this is the way I handle it. There are also people, though, who are cowards. They're Christians that want to serve God and money. They want to serve God and mammon. That ain't a good plan. Okay. Right. There are also Christians that don't have my personality. They're more biblical in that they are meek and humble, and kind, and so they're not going to be, just by nature, they're not going to go in and start swinging their sword around like I do. Sure, I'm saying that's twofold, but I'm shocked at how few. Most Christians are not interested in publicly proclaiming the gospel. They will not defend God when He is dismantled in the marketplace. They have shame, real guilt and shame about the scriptures. They'd never say in a boardroom, homosexuals will not inherit the kingdom of God. Right. If you can't say that scripture, then you have a low view of the Word of God. Yeah. And most of us, who wants to face what's going to happen if you say that scripture? Who wants to volunteer that? Because it's not just going to be a visit on you. Your children aren't going to eat. Your wife isn't going to eat. You're not going to make your house payment. You're not going to, but even worse, even more important, you're not going to look cool on Twitter. Most Christians, like in our history, they've been fed to lions and they did not bow. In America, you just have to make fun of someone on Twitter a little bit and call them a homophobe, and they'll buckle like that. You don't have to even get to the feed their kids to lions. Sure. Today's Christians, all gone. I'm done. Why is Doug so insensitive? What are we going to do about this problem? Just love them into the kingdom and all this. It's they're all excuses made to keep from saying what the Bible says pretty clearly in ways that make me look kind and gentle. It's brutal. If I'm brutal, God's 10 times more brutal.
Right. I think one thing that's been freeing to me is to realize, like, I worked at Apologia as an occasional on-screen talent. I have said things that will get me canceled.
Yeah.
I am pre-canceled. I come pre-canceled because of.
They just need to do a Google search on your past.
Oh, I'm done.
They'll get it.
Done. So there's no chance for me to get into that, some sort of lofty position in any of this artistic industries, which gives me a lot of freedom because I don't have to worry about censoring myself when it comes to whatever creative things I do. Yeah. I can just go forward and live in that freedom. And that's something you said earlier, like you can't serve both God and money, like God and mammon. You can't do it. You choose today who you will follow.
Choose you this day whom you will serve. This today.
Right.
And what's weird is I just got reached out the last couple of weeks from Hollywood about Bigfoot Bill. They're reading it. A big producer for a big major company is reading it. And he goes, I like this. And when can we have a call? And at that call, I'm going to tell him, you don't want this. But I'm amazed that Hollywood is still calling. Yeah. And that's all up to God. I go, God, if you want this to go, I'm going to be as upfront as I can with this guy. Look, I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian with a big mouth. I have said stuff that would get anyone canceled.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have the backbone, let's just save the apology and the kill this thing now. I go, if you're ready to fight, and that means, and I'll tell him, you can say, I disagree with everything Doug says. I don't like Doug. You can say anything you want. I go, and we can do this project. I said, but I will not apologize. So if you say you're going to have to sign this boilerplate before we can do this project, that ain't going to happen. I'm telling you now. So that's when we have the call. And I'm like, yeah, great production. I'm ready. I can do anything you want. I can write, I can direct. I'll sit back and let you hire a writer and direct. You can have any rights you want. I'm not going to ask for much money. Go have fun with it. But after that conversation has to be, you better be ready to fight because they will come after you in this production and try and get it canceled. How comfortable are you in your own skin?
Right. Well, Doug, I want to jump to some questions from the chat before we move on to something else, just so I don't forget. My good friend P Money, who you may recognize that name from.
Yeah, I recognize P Money. P Money.
So P Money had to dip out. He had to go back to work because he's a responsible family man. But he asked this question, and he had talked to me about it the other day, wanting to ask this question. You worked on VeggieTales. That was your favorite project you've ever worked on.
Oh, that's not true. Yeah. That's hilarious.
There was a character on that you created for that show called Bacon Bill.
That's right.
He wants to know, is there any connection between Bacon Bill and Bigfoot Bill?
No, I name my simple characters Bill a lot. So in Cardboard, there's a boxer named Bill. There's Bacon Bill. There's Bigfoot Bill in the Neverhood. So kind of the homie guys named, they're named Bill. So it's really a sentimental, brotherly neighbor, a little goofy, a little out of it. What's your name? Bill. It's just funny to me. So,
yeah.
I like the alliterative names. It's sort of a Stan Lee-ism where, like, Peter Parker, or in the Superman of Lois Lane. It's really a comic book thing.
It's short. And it has a rhythm. Bacon Bill. Bigfoot Bill.
Yeah.
Bigfoot Bill. Yep.
So there was another question. This one comes from my lovely wife. She says, have you ever thought about writing a book?
Yes.
Or do you see yourself? Yeah. So you said yes. I personally think that would be amazing because there are not enough good comedy books out there. Especially, like, I can think of Terry Pratchett was a comedic fantasy writer. And then the only other book I've ever read other than a Terry Pratchett book that I think made me laugh out loud was, it was actually a nonfiction book by Sparky Lyle called The Bronx Zoo. And it was about the Yankees in the 70s. And Sparky Lyle was a closing pitcher for them. And that's the only other book I've ever read that's made me laugh out loud. And I think if there's any man that could write,
I would write something probably so unhinged and barely readable, like Flow of Conscious. It would be my theory of everything. So it might have fiction even rolling through it, which is my favorite kind of thing, is to have something full of just truth and personal stuff and theology that, and I'd love to do it someday. I'll get there maybe when I retire or something. I just had Chris Neiswanger was one of my favorite thinkers, and he's a Reformed theologian. And he said, Doug, when are you going to write a book? Like, he keeps challenging me. He goes, I'm just putting this on your mind. You need to write a book.
Well, someone that's inspired me to get back into writing prose is a friend of yours, Nasser Rabadi.
Yep, I love Nasser.
That guy. I remember being his age. He's in his early 20s, and I remember being in his age, and I'd taken a bunch of writing classes in college, and I wrote better than anybody in the class, and the teacher was always highlighting my work, and I felt so happy for myself. And then I never wrote anything outside of the stupid
That's
class.
Right.
And
that was me in creative writing too, by the way. I got all the A's and I never wrote anything.
Right. So Nasser writes every single day, and he's put out 3 books and a short story collection and 2 comic books, and he has another comic book he's trying to get produced. And there is some inspiration there in his tenacity and his drive that has pushed me forward.
He's going to kill it. I'm just saying, you're going to bet on someone. I bet on that guy.
Yeah.
I don't bet. I know a lot of writers. I'll bet on Nasser.
Yeah.
That's where I place my bet.
And one of the things like I love about him is he knows his deficiencies, and he knows and recognizes that there's things he needs to grow on.
Yeah.
And that's really the quality that an artist needs, I think, is to be able to receive criticism and move forward and still put things out. It shows
he loves the medium. That was my thing, is I don't care if I make bad art. I love drawing. I've always loved drawing. I love sculpting. I've always loved sculpting. Even when it's bad, it is fun to make. Nasser loves writing. And then lo and behold, if someone has that love, like if you just like banging on the piano and making music, if you're going to do it for 10 years, right? Every day for 8 hours, where are you going to be in 10 years?
Right.
You'll probably be one of the most unique, amazing piano players. You may not be able to do classical music, but you'll do your thing in a way that is so insane. And that's what Nasser's going to be as a writer. He could, he's doing like sometimes 12,000 words in a day. You write like that for 10 years. And he'll probably redefine writing.
Yeah. There's not many people with that work ethic and that drive, especially in novel writing. You get somebody like David Foster Wallace, who writes a book and 3/4 of a book over his career before he meets his chosen demise. But someone like Nasser, who views it as his, I don't know if you call it a calling, but his main motivating factor in his life is to write. You wonder, like, what will that person get to? What level will they be able to do, because they've been putting so much time and effort into putting stuff out.
And he'll just have fun. So what if it doesn't work, but he's having fun? And he'll be exactly as unemployed as 99.9% of the writers out there. So big loss. He's loving it and having a better time than most.
Nasser, like these past couple months, he's sold, I think, something like 40 books, either digital or in print, on Amazon. He always keeps everybody updated on that. Yeah. And that's, guess what? That's 40 more books than most people who fancy themselves a writer have ever sold in their life.
That's right. I haven't sold any books.
Yeah.
I haven't sold any novels, so he's doing better than me.
Right.
I love it.
Hey, Doug, I did have another question from P Money. He said, what cartoon you worked on are you most proud of?
It's Cat Scratch by a mile.
Okay.
Nickelodeon, that was the best team, best writing, best simple characters, just like as close as I'll ever get to doing a Warner Brothers cartoon. It's my favorite.
Awesome. So I've always wondered, because I did not have cable as a kid, so I didn't see Cat Scratch when it came out. Never watched it. It was on since it was on Nickelodeon. But what was why did it not hit as hard as some of those other cartoons from that era? You have.
I don't know. I think the highest we ever got on the network was we were the fourth most popular show on their network, which pretty much at Nickelodeon would get you cut.
Yeah.
You wanted top 3, and the rest, whatever.
Well, even like someone mentioned Butch Hartman in the chat, and Butch had, of course, the Fairly Odd Parents, but then he also had Danny Phantom and Tough Puppy, all these things.
Huge.
old. So like, here's a guy with the second biggest show ever on Nickelodeon, second only to SpongeBob, and he got his shows cut. So it's a tough.
But he made it. His went on a lot longer. My only did 2 seasons. All my television shows have never done better than 2 seasons.
Another question. This is from my beautiful wife, who is watching. She said, if you were to start reading any of the books that you mentioned today, which one would you start with? I'm assuming, you guys are talking about a lot of different books out there. I don't know any of them. So what would you recommend for somebody like me?
I would start with, they're all good, but I would say, I think Cardboard is probably one of my best comics.
Cool.
Fan favorite is Creature Tech through Image. Cardboard is through Scholastic. And then if you want to support my work, then backing Earthworm Jim 1 and 2 or Bigfoot Bill 1 and 2, because that's actually how I pay my rent. I do get some royalties on those other books, but really the big, taco is going to be Earthworm Jim.
Let's talk about these books. You're putting out
beautiful book.
You're putting out these books. This is totally worth it, guys. I can't shill this enough. If you haven't backed these, you need to go and you need to set aside the money on right now to get both Bigfoot Bill 1 and 2. And
here's the new Bigfoot Bill cover. You see that? Hold up your old one. Let's compare it to the new one.
So this is the first edition, and that second edition has
more. Edition has. See how the art is exploded now, all on the entire cover. The gold is shinier.
I like that.
We got some UV gloss on Bigfoot Bill, and the back cover. Compare your back cover. Look at that. This has the same filigree, but now it's filled with all the gang, a nice watercolor back.
So I can't recommend them enough. All these books are fantastic, and there's people on crowdfunding that are selling you, basically your normal floppy comic that you get at the comic book store for the same amount that Doug is selling you this book, this hardback, beautiful,
gold gilded.
Yeah.
And you know what? Comic fans don't care. They're so stupid.
Yeah.
They don't care.
That's why, I'm hoping, because mostly this audience is not someone that has done probably any crowdfunding on comics. They might have video games, but that's one of the reasons why we wanted to get you on Coin A Geek, is because these are video game guys that love some of your work that you've worked on, and they don't even know that this stuff is out.
Yeah, you got to go to Kickstarter and look up Earthworm Jim 2 and come in and you can get the Earthworm Jim 1 and 2 tier. You can get caught up on the book. If you want Bigfoot Bill, there's a 4-book tier. You can get Bigfoot Bill 1 and 2. You can get Earthworm Jim 1 and 2. And these are big, beautiful books. The stories are complete. They're huge. These are 160-page books. And they all have gold gilded edges now, hardbound with 2 different colors of foil, embossing, debossing, just beautiful, beautiful books. I'm proud of them. You'll become a fan.
Yeah,
I need your support. I need support. I need fans and people coming in underneath me and saying, I believe in your form of creativity and I'm voting for you. This is how you vote, how you do something about it.
If there are books, if you're not a comic book reader, but you say, I'm kind of interested, there is some books that right here that deserve your money. And if you make one comic book purchase this year, let it be this one, I'd say.
Oh yeah. And it goes on the coffee table. I mean, this isn't something that you just kind of read and toss aside like some little floppy. This is a coffee table book. It looks great in your library.
I'm dropping a link in the chat for your Kickstarter. Also, when we upload this on YouTube, we'll make sure to leave it in the description as well. How much time do you have, Doug? I know you're a busy guy. Are you good for a couple more questions?
I'm good for a couple more questions, but my daughter just came home from college. We just sent her off from college. She turned 18 this year. So Wednesday she went to school and she's back for the weekend. And I miss her so. She's only been gone since Wednesday, and I'm hard.
No, I understand. I'll make these brief for you. I want to give 2 of my biggest supporters a chance to ask you a question.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yoshi OST asked, did anything change in terms of public response when you were invited to share time with Butch Hartman?
Did anything change? You mean from the audience? Do you think he's talking about?
Maybe so. Public response. I don't really know what he's referring to, if I'm being honest.
I'm a longtime old friend of Butch's, and he's a great guy.
Yeah,
but I think that of almost everyone. And a lot of people don't like, supposedly he did something on Kickstarter where he raised money and wasn't quite able to fulfill. So there's that, and I don't care. He's also, it belongs to like a training ministry, healing ministry. And people don't like that. And I don't care. So I'm only saying, I give my friends a pretty long leash to be themselves. I just don't get the rules. Where's the book that says you can't be Butch Hartman? Where's the rule? So a lot of fans, I think, try to kick back, and they'll go after Butch too. They'll say, "Hey, Butch, you had a homophobe on your show, and you have to distance yourself." And Butch stands with me. Not that he agrees with what I say, but he also doesn't say, "I apologize for having Doug on the show." None of that. So I'm just saying, when the persecution comes, there's certain kinds of guys you want on your side. Butch is one of the guys I want on my side, and I will be on his side to the end. If he walks with me to the end, I'll walk with him to the end.
Wonderful. Thank you. The last question that I have, and then we'll let you go. This is from the Theologian, who he asks, what do you think is the biggest issue facing animation today?
I mean, stories are garbage. It's secularism. They can't tell heroic stories. They can't tell they can't make heroes, true heroism for the American male. They can't do that. And if you don't have American males being heroes, it doesn't matter how many female heroes you have. You'll never bridge that gap. So really the ideal, this is a Platonic idea. This is a theologian would know this. Plato believed in the ideals, that somewhere out there was a perfect circle. Though no one's ever seen one and no one can ever make one. We know there's an ideal cat. We know there's an ideal this or that. And that's where we put our virtues and values, their ideals. We're so far off. They're not even aiming for the ideals anymore in these stories. So even if the artistry was good, and the artistry is going to go down the tubes too, the stories they tell are going to be forgettable, worthless dreck that won't be true a year from now. We're not true 100 years ago. We'll probably never be true. So they're literally a waste of time.
That is incredible insight. And I've been thinking along those same ways in that, I think about, I'm a big Star Wars fan, and I think about some of the differences between the three trilogies and what makes the original trilogy last so long as that, even though George Lucas is obviously not a believer, he hits on those universal themes and truths that don't matter. They have nothing to do with the time or the era that we're living in, right? They have to do with what is actually true. Yeah. All that Joseph Conrad stuff. But just what's true about us as human beings, right? And what we long for. And I haven't completed the article yet, but there was actually an article on Polygon, out of all sites, which I think is a more liberal-leaning site, that talked about the need and the space for more games to tell stories that actually had black and white, like good and evil. And I was like, whoa, wait, you mean you're going to push aside this whole subjectivism, morally gray? Not that I love the anti-hero stuff. Don't get me wrong. Everybody loves Batman, but you need a Superman in there. You need somebody that can actually stand for truth, justice, and oh my gosh, the American way, whatever that is now. So to hear you say that, and it really resonates with me, because I do feel as though many of these stories are going to be utterly forgettable in 10 years. And this is going to be whatever the flavor of the day is.
Writing, it's true for animation. I believe it's true in music. Like, listen to, when was the last great love song? You go back to the 70s, you hear love songs of a guy going, I can't wait to meet you, and I love you, and I can't wait to see you. And now it's just, they can't even talk. Pretty soon we won't even be able to speak. So if you write music and if you write words and stuff, then you ought to get it out there. You ought to put it back out there and represent. The remnant need to show up and hold up the fort.
All right, Doug, one more softball question from Cyrena, who you might recognize. Cyrena Sketches. Doug, what's your favorite character to draw?
I mean, I like easy characters are fun. The little fishy ones, like the Gear cats in Gear that became Cat Scratch. Little goofy cartoon characters are fun. I mean, my goofy cylindrical head characters, like in the Neverhood and Earthworm Jim, that's just a natural cadence that I do to my drawings. I mean, I like anything. I do like monsters, though. Goofy little monsters. Anything. I just love drawing all day.
Awesome.
You're in the right career.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doug, for being on.
Yeah, man. Thanks so
really
much.
Appreciate this so much.
Thanks for having me, guys. Get me the link when this goes out, and I'll throw it around.
We will.
Wonderful. Anything else you want to plug or say before you head out?
Just have courage, because I don't want it to be like the despair show. Saying like, hey, things are terrible. Things are terrible. Things are normal terrible in God's eyes. They're normal terrible. So you have courage, and don't let the persecution or the drama or the fear take your joy away, because joy really shouldn't be rooted in your circumstances.
Amen.
In fact, if it is, maybe it's not joy. And I just think we should be focusing more on a true, confident knowledge of the good, our own salvation. There's great joy in getting to sit with you guys and talk about this stuff. We're still free. We're still having a good time. So there's a lot to be. And it would be terrible if all this passed and we didn't say thanks for it while we had it.
Amen.
Right.
Wonderful. Right. Thank you again, Doug. Appreciate it. I'll let you take it out, Daniel.
All right. Well, guys, thanks for joining us back on our first episode in a long time. More to come. And hopefully you guys will go back Doug's stuff. He's an amazing artist, and support him and hopefully support us as well. See you guys later.
We'll do this again, hopefully. God bless.
Pay for what you want repeated, guys. Back this up. Spread the word.
All right. Play the games the way you want to play them.
All right. We'll leave a coin on the cabinet for you. Peace out.